Hello everyone, welcome back to TrekChat. Just kind of sitting here with my morning coffee and thought I'd record my thoughts on a few things. There's been a ton of information coming out in the past few days in relation to the near future of Star Trek. Lots of reveals of upcoming projects that we know are down the pipeline, and lots of cool sci-fi stuff in general. I've been following lots of news of tons of different action figure and collectible lines from different series too, not just Star Trek, and a lot of it just kind of curiosity. There's some of those that it's like, yeah, that looks pretty awesome, but not the price of a new car awesome. But there's some cool stuff out there. It's kind of fun to explore. And did a video talking about some of the upcoming Star Trek figures, waves coming in the future, 3 and 4 from Nacelle for Star Trek. And then we have a teaser image for this next week's coming, well, this current week, coming up here, the next episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. And this one is going to be the murder mystery episode directed by Jonathan Frakes, which he has talked about, obviously not giving anything away NDA-wise, but talking about how much he thinks that it's turned out to be a great episode. So we'll see how much of that is. You never know if it's sort of like hype advertising or truthful, like, I think this is really great. But I always get the feeling from him that he thinks it's a great episode. So we'll see how this episode turns out. I just hope that it's not going for the kind of outlandish humor element, because sometimes when Strange New Worlds goes too broad in that, it gets a little too silly and ridiculous, and that kind of leads to the Season 4 teaser they put out there. My thoughts on that. Because Season 4, if you don't know, is already wrapped up filming. It's already in the post-production phase. Like Season 4, I really feel like of Strange New Worlds, there will not be a very big delay between Season 3 and 4. Probably very beginning of next year, we'll see Season 4, and then that short Season 5 to wrap things up by the end of next year. But the teaser that they showed is Captain Pike as a Muppet, a puppet version of himself, very reminiscent of, people were immediately talking about the episode of Angel from the Buffyverse. And I love Star Trek, and I love the Muppets. I have been a huge Muppet fan since I was a little kid. I was very happy I was able to see the Muppet Show at Disney before they closed that down. I mean, I love the Muppets, but I'm really torn on this. And again, it comes to things I've talked about with Strange New Worlds, and not necessarily their fault, but more the landscape of modern television. And, they go, I think, again, like I said, sometimes too far with the broad humor to where, like, a Star Trek can be funny, don't get me wrong. Star Trek TOS and TNG has some great humor. Deep Space Nine has some amazing humor. There's really a lot of great witty dialogue and moments of humor in Star Trek. But there's a fine line, there's a difference between that and, again, doing a full-blown musical, and having an episode where everyone's turned into Muppets. Sometimes in a lot of the modern Star Trek context, they take that there's that line of humor to where Star Trek was always something with plausible reality, where it is something technologically beyond our means, and the situations are beyond understanding, and there's a lot of kind of soft sci-fi creativity elements in some parts of Star Trek, but there was still always this element of being able to see yourself in that world, and there's the bit of grounded realism within the fantastical to give it that real unique Star Trek feeling. And sometimes something like Stranger Worlds can just jump over that line to where it just becomes a completely silly fantasy and loses that little bit of grounding that it needs. That's at the heart of Star Trek. And it's frustrating because sometimes those elements are, for what they are, genuinely well done. They just fit more the tone of something like Buffy rather than Star Trek. And it's extra frustrating because when Strange New Worlds does do more of a grounded Star Trek feeling story, it can be fantastic. I talk about the Comet, that being like a great episode. Sometimes, like, the Cloak of War, like, there are moments where it can do real great grounded Star Trek. At Astra per Aspera, like, there are moments where it can really do it and do a great job. And I'm just kind of worried whenever they go for that big swing for the fences kind of silliness that sometimes that it just doesn't work. And so I'm a little bit worried about how that's going to turn out, even though I'm a huge fan of the Muppets. And it is something that, too, I feel like maybe it'll come out and maybe it will actually be genuinely entertaining and well done and funny, but it will not feel very Star Trek, and that's weird. And it's kind of a hard spot for Star Trek right now, because you do have that series that is devoted to the ridiculous comedy, and it's fine because it works kind of because it is just an animated comedy show. Lower Decks, like, that is the premise of the show. It is not the grounded, main vessel Star Trek. It is a animated comedy show, and so that kind of level of silliness is expected, and that's fine as a side show. But you want there to be a core Star Trek show, the linchpin of what the franchise has, and then a funny side show is great. A kid show on the side, that's awesome to broaden the scope of the franchise, but you need that core show to kind of be the keystone of the wide berth of offerings that just feels like a genuine Star Trek show. And Strange New World kind of is that, but at moments it doesn't want to be, and that's frustrating, especially when, again, talking about the modern TV landscape, your season's only 10 episodes long. This kind of silly broad stroke episode might feel less ridiculous and out of place if you had a normal, like, 22 to 26 episode season. But the problem with the TV landscape is that when you do this big, silly episode, it's 10% of the runtime of your entire season. So it really stands out, and it really feels like you're using an opportunity to tell a really great science fiction story to tell a funny, goofy little side story. And I like those things. Those can, again, I love when shows do that kind of entertainment, and those, not everything has to be obvious. No, it all means sci-fi stories and just has to be serious drama, no. But something that's so off the wall and breaks the bounds of the style of storytelling of its program to be something kind of very out there, that's kind of a fun little thing to do, but not when you only have 10 episodes to tell stories with these characters. So I don't know. Again, I'm going to, with everything, and especially considering the topic I'm going to talk about next, I always reserve judgment until I see it. I'm just going to give you my initial thoughts and opinions regarding that, because that leads into the teasers we've had now for Star Trek Academy, the Starfleet Academy series, which is going to be 2 seasons, and I think it's going to be 2 and done, with depending on what goes on with the Skydance Paramount merger, what's happening behind the scenes. But we have it's going to be released, I think, early next year. Definitely next year is guaranteed, 2026. And we have a teaser trailer, lots of images, looks at characters, and I'm very mixed. Again, I want to tune in and give it a shot, because you know that first impressions and teasers are one thing, but the actual thing is another thing. Because it doesn't, from what I've been seeing, it really doesn't interest me, but you never know. Just because the initial, again, preview and premise doesn't quite capture my attention, the actual thing could be fantastic. And it is kind of like what I expected it to be, though. Like, it is something that is targeting that kind of CW teen. It's not targeting me, so I don't expect it to. That's one thing. It's not like you want to look at a show and you don't really like it just because it's really, you're not the audience for it. I like to be able to watch something and see beyond that and see whether something is good. Like, I don't know if part of that comes from always watching like younger kids and watching a lot of shows that they're watching and being able to see, okay, this one was really well done and has some meaning to what they're watching. It's not just gibberish and other things, and finding some entertainment value. But so I'm not really the target demographic, but I think there's a lot in there that could be interesting. The visuals are a mix of good and bad. A lot of the prosthetic and costume work looks downright fantastic, like genuinely looks impressive, but I'm not really sold on a lot of the sets and a lot of the other visual stuff that, again, feels very much visual style to Discovery, which just, I wasn't a fan of the visual styling a lot of that, and I feel like there's going to be, again, how tied tonally to Discovery is it, I think is going to be a big thing for a lot of people watching. Because the style and the tone of the storytelling, is it going to feel like Discovery because it is something that's kind of branching off from where that show ended? Or is it going to feel more like A Strange New Worlds? Or is it going to feel like it's trying to recapture the pacing and storytelling of older Star Trek? Like, how is it going to be? You can't always tell that just from the teaser. You need to watch an actual episode. So I'm looking forward to at least checking that out, because it's very much what I'm seeing so far, what I expected it to be. But we'll see how it turns out and how they play around with some different Star Trek things, because they're going to take a lot of liberties with things being so far in the future, of course, but I feel like there's going to be some like lower decks level fan service and referencing in here. I feel like there's going to be a lot of that, and that's going to be kind of their way of trying to capture old fans. I really feel like they're going to go that direction, but how much will they be over reliant on that rather than just telling good original stories? Will it be too much bits and pieces of nostalgia bait to make people watch? And then even if you do rely on that and you get people to watch because of that factor, then you have to be careful, like, are you going to get all that stuff, correct? Like, are you going to totally mess with storytelling that has been told over many, many, many decades? Even I'm curious to see, I'd love to see the explanation of, like, one of the main recurring characters is a Jem'Hadar Klingon hybrid, which it'd be interesting. I'd love to hear the backstory of how that works. Is that some sort of program that was done over time to get rid of the dependence on Ketracel White? Because there are no female Jem'Hadar. They don't reproduce sexually. Like, they are basically manufactured. So how does that work? But I'd be curious, like, if that could be an interesting background to see, like, how does this character even exist? Like, that could be cool. And again, that character, the makeup and costume work, at least from that perspective, is fantastic. So there seems to be some good there, and I'm curious to see how it turns out. What is this show going to be? And talking about why I think that it's only going to be the 2 seasons and done, and Strange New Worlds is ending with a short 5th season. I'm curious to hear what you think is going to be happening as the ball is finally rolling. Things are really getting in motion with the Skydance Paramount merger, and it's going to have major ramifications for the very near future of Star Trek. I said I think a lot of the projects that are coming out, and they're coming out very quickly, are things that were already under contract, things that were already kind of had things moving along, that were already in motion before this process started, and the process, of course, takes a long time. Get the okay from regulators, and then to actually go through, and then to determine what changes are we making to programming. So that kind of stuff can take years. So that's why I feel like a lot of this stuff is not just coming out, but coming out very quickly. And I really think that by the end of 2026, very beginning of like first quarter 2027, we're going to see this era of Star Trek pretty much wrap up and let us know what is coming. Because I think Star Trek still is something that is going to be one of the franchises in the forefront in the future of Paramount, but will it take a little bit of a hiatus and kind of come back with some stuff, or will it roll right into something very new? We'll see what goes on, but there's definitely going to be some major changes, and I feel like any of these shows that we're seeing right now are going to be wrapping up fairly quickly as we move into another era of big change for the franchise.